In the headlines, Korea's ruling party wins a landslide victory in the parliamentary by-elections, securing seats in 11 of the 15 constituencies. The two leaders of the main opposition party quit over a crushing defeat in the by-elections. And the liberal heavyweight Son Hak-kyu announces his retirement from politics after losing to a conservative rookie. And the collapse of talks with American creditors sends Argentina into its second debt default in 13 years.
Hello and welcome to Primetime News, live from Seoul. I'm Sean Lim.
And I'm Kang Tae-ri. Thanks for joining us. It was an overwhelming victory for the ruling party in Korea's largest by-elections, which won 11 seats to regain its majority in the National Assembly.
We'll take you deep into what this means for Korean politics and the president's reform drive. But first, for a wrap-up of which politicians are now in play, here's our Kim Min-ji with the election results.
The ruling Saenuri party took home 11 out of the 15 parliamentary seats up for grabs in Wednesday's by-elections, regaining majority at the National Assembly. In the hotly contested race of Seoul's Dongjak-bi district, the ruling party's former Seoul mayor candidate Na Kyung-won secured a ticket to parliament after defeating her unified opposition rival Do Hae-chan. In the Suwon-si district of Gyeonggi-do province, opposition candidate and political big name Son Hak-kyu bowed out to conservative rookie Kim Myung-nam. In the Suwon-D district, the opposition's Park Kwang-won, a former journalist, came out the winner against his ruling party rival and chief of staff to former President Lee Myung-bak, Im Tae-hee. The ruling party swept the other three capital area districts, including Gimpo, where the ruling party's Hong Cho-do tasted victory against liberal political veteran Kim Do-kwan. Securing all of the two seats in its traditional stronghold of southeastern Gyeongsang region, the ruling party also took all three seats from the central Chungcheong area. As for the opposition, it won 3 seats from the political base of southwestern Jeolla region. But the 4th seat in the Suncheon-Goksang district was claimed by President Bak's close aide Lee Jung-hyun, the first time ever by a ruling party candidate. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
And to take responsibility for the main opposition's crushing defeat, the party's leadership resigned this Thursday. And that includes once rising political star Ahn Cheol-soo, along with the retirement of a longtime politico who had been talked up as a presidential candidate in the next election. Choi You-sun reports.
Apologizing for their party's crushing defeat in Wednesday's by-elections, the co-leaders of the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy have stepped aside after just 4 months at the helm.
I take all the responsibility and will resign as party co-leader. I will work to make sure our party carries out major reforms to regain the public's trust.
Former independent presidential candidate Ahn Cheol-soo, who had ascended to party leadership after merging with the main opposition Democratic Party in March, said he too would do his best for the good of the party as an ordinary member. All other members of the party's Supreme Council followed their co-leaders out the door, claiming responsibility for the election loss. The leaders had been heavily criticized for causing friction during the nomination process and thereby lowering the party's chances of a good showing in the poll. Floor leader Park Young-sun now assumes temporary leadership of the party. She, along with an emergency committee, will seek ways to help the party rise from the ashes and elect a new leader. Different factions within the party are expected to elbow for position in the process. The one who's likely to be most affected, however, is Ahn Cheol-soo. Once considered a political sensation and a presidential hopeful, Ahn missed out on a valuable chance Wednesday to prove his reform-minded leadership in the party. And on Thursday, a bigwig within the opposition bloc, Son Hak-kyu, who lost a seat in the capital region to a ruling party newcomer, announced his retirement from politics. Son was considered a potential presidential candidate, and his retirement is expected to affect the dynamics of the opposition's next presidential campaign. Choi You-sun, Arirang News.
And moving forward, the ruling party is likely to take this outcome as a go-ahead for the government's push to boost the economy and carry out reforms. Kim Young-gil has more on how the Saenuri Party and the presidential office plan to work together.
President Park Geun-hye has been given the green light to get busy running state affairs for the rest of her term. The ruling Saenuri Party's unexpected landslide victory in Wednesday's by-election has given the government a mandate to rebuild itself in the wake of April's ferry disaster and pursue its stated goal of economic revival.
The people voted for the Saenuri Party because the public felt the urgency to reform the country and revive the economy.
The governing party promised to support President Park in carrying out her national reform drives and not to use politics to divide the people.
The Saenuri Party will denounce any form of regionalism that is deeply rooted in Korean politics and will work toward bringing about national unity.
The ruling party's new chairman, Kim Moo-sung, is expected to use the election win as a mandate to carry out a complete overhaul of the party. With no elections scheduled until 2016, Kim has ample time to make his mark. It is also possible that he may equalize the nature of the relationship between the party and the presidential house of Cheongwade. The ruling Saenuri Party now has 158 seats in the 300-seat National Assembly. The main opposition party has 130. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
And to get an expert's view on this election outcome, we're joined by Dr. Lee Young-jak today. Welcome to our studio.
Thank you.
So what did you read from the election outcome? Why do you think voters went overwhelmingly conservative this time?
I don't know whether it is whether they went to conservative, but they went to the ruling party, or they left the opposition party and went to the ruling party. In fact, the opposition party didn't have a reason to be voted for. They stopped all the legislative actions, and furthermore, they made a blunder by nominating whistleblowing policewoman to Gwangju. That really casts a long shadow, while the ruling party was talking about economy. We have to revive the economy. And I think that that made a change.
And political heavyweights like Son Hak-kyu, Im Tae-hee, and Kim Ju-kwan didn't do so well this time around. Do you think people wanted new faces running their regions?
They want new faces and new politics, fresh face and new politics. And Ahn Cheol-soo became instant hit a couple of years ago because he was new and he seemed to have new ideas. And so he became sort of a national phenomenon. But in the end, he doesn't show.
Speaking of the spirit of new, do you think the Korean public is ready to move away from strict regionalism? We saw in this election the Suncheon Gokseong district, which is traditionally a liberal stronghold, be won by a conservative.
You have to look at this. 30 years ago or so, when this regionalism became more solidified, the Cholla province was under control of Mr. Kim Dae-jung, who eventually became president. He was very strong. He was a hopeful of Cholla. He was like, everything for Cholla. And so whatever he says, he has to be National Assemblyman. He has to be National Assemblyman. But he's gone. He served the presidency and he's gone. There is no leader in Cholla.
So what does this outcome mean for the opposition party now that its leadership resigned to take responsibility? Is it time for Ahn Cheol-soo to strike out again on his own?
I think he lost his chance. I think that he cannot avoid the responsibility. He has to claim the responsibility for this disastrous election loss. And then furthermore, he hasn't shown anything new, anything fresh, any new politics, and that disappoints a lot of people.
A lot of legislation has been held up through all of this political bickering. Now that the president has her party in the National Assembly, do you think we're going to see a rapid progression of new policies, or are there still lingering political frictions that will get in the way?
It doesn't have anything to do with political friction. According to Korean National Assembly law, unless two parties, opposition and ruling party, agrees, the ruling party has to secure 60% of vote. That's practically impossible. So without the consent from opposition party, ruling party cannot pass any legislatures.
It would still mean that the opposition party cannot oppose when it comes to every single bill and just to show message. You know what I mean? Because it needs to watch for the public's opinion and what the people said this time around in the election.
But on the other hand, within the opposition, they have to position themselves. Within opposition, there are factions. These factions have a nominating power. And therefore, if you go out of way from factions' ideas, the factions' consensus, you look at the nomination next time. And therefore, they have to listen to the faction boss.
So they're listening to the political party leadership and not the people.
That's right.
As you're saying, and
Exactly.
that's one of the big problems
That's
in
right.
representative politics.
That's right, and that's precisely the reason why the nomination power has to be returned to the people. But the party boss has absolute power on the nomination, and therefore the National Assemblyman will first listen to the party boss rather than to public.
All right. Well, not exactly an automatic smooth sailing for the Park Geun-hye administration, and we'll be watching how this political world goes. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing your thoughts with us today.
Yeah.
Curry's comments came in response to
Your gateway to the day's biggest stories in Korea and around the world. Breaking news, the hottest interviews, and a whole lot more. Join Arirang Sean Lim and Kang Chae-ri from the heart of Seoul.
Begins now.
Primetime news, weeknights, live at 10 on Arirang TV.
Government measures to revitalize the housing market in Korea, mainly easing household loan regulations, are set to take effect on this Friday. But as our Kim Ji-yeon reports, it could add to the mounting household debt problem in the country, especially for the older generation.
Some government regulations on the housing market are being eased starting Friday, and the Korean economy is expected to start feeling the effects in the latter half of this year. The changes include easing measures that limit the amount that people can borrow from banks when buying a house, depending on various economic variables, including income. The loan-to-value and debt-to-income, or LTV and DTI ratios, are being raised to 70% and 60% respectively. This means home buyers would be able to borrow up to $340,000, up nearly $100,000 from the current total when buying a house worth $488,000. They'll also feel less pressure to turn to non-banking institutions that charge them higher interest rates. The policy has already started to bring some vitality into the housing market. The number of housing transactions in Seoul shot up in July, which is traditionally an off month for home buying. The Financial Supervisory Service says the amount of housing mortgage loans increased by 80% in June from the previous month to $475 million, the highest amount in 12 months. But the moves are also being met with concern. It's feared the deregulatory moves may lead people in their 50s or older into more debt. Last month, the amount of housing mortgage loans for people in those older age groups increased an average of 20% from 2 years earlier. This according to data from Korea's 4 major commercial banks. They were apparently trying to pay back debt accrued from self-employed businesses and from losses incurred after failing to sell houses amid falling prices. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Samsung Electronics has posted some very disappointing second quarter figures on the back of weakening smartphone sales and the strong Korean won. The tech giant's second quarter operating profit was down 24.5% on year, coming in at just under 7.2 trillion won. That's a touch over $7 billion. Its sales also slumped nearly 9% on year.
And on the other hand, Korea's biggest internet search engine had its earnings soar in the second quarter. Naver recorded significant rises in its operating profit on strong overseas sales, driven by its messenger application service Line. Our Hwang Ji-ae has the details.
Naver's strong second quarter numbers came from overseas sales that were boosted by Line. Its operating profit went up 38.5% on year to 191.2 billion won, or roughly $186 million. Line, its Japan-based messenger app, saw its sales soar on year during the period. And it's not just the volume of sales that's given the company a green light for expansion. Analysts point to Line's increased sales coming outside of Japan.
Around 80% of Line's revenue came from Japan in the past, but the second quarter numbers shows that 25% of the revenue is coming from other countries, like Thailand.
Although Naver's CFO has warned of an aggressive marketing plan later this year potentially hurting its future earnings, the market seems to like Naver's globalization of its sales sources. With Line, its main growth engine, set to go public in Tokyo and in the U.S., some are predicting a new race in the global messaging market, which is currently led by three leaders: Facebook's WhatsApp, Tencent's WeChat based in China, and Naver's Line dominating the Japanese market.
Looking at the emailing services market and search engines, there has been multiple players that took leadership in particular regions. But this was combined into one or two global companies, so a power shakeup in the messaging market will likely take place.
Analysts also expect a cutthroat competition among messaging service providers as they jockey for position in the Latin American and Northeast Asian markets where no one company has established itself. Hwang Ji-ae, Arirang News.
Staying with tech news, Korea's mobile internet usage ratio is the highest in the Asia-Pacific region at more than 70%. Market research firm eMarketer also says Korea will continue leading the mobile internet usage in the region through 2018. The average ratio in Asia was lower than 30% this year, but it's expected to expand to more than 38% by 2018. Behind Korea are Australia, Japan, and China, while India is the fastest growing mobile internet market in the region.
Argentina has defaulted on its debt for the second time in 13 years after failing to reach a deal with the U.S. creditors before deadline.
With more on this story, we now turn to Paul Yi at the News Center. Paul, Argentina is already in a double-dip recession. Should it be bracing for another economic meltdown?
Well, Latin America's third largest economy is yet again in the red, but analysts say the effects of this fresh default is not likely to be as severe compared to its debt crisis in 2011. The Argentine economy minister has blamed this breakdown in negotiations on U.S. hedge funds that are demanding a full repayment on its government bonds worth some $1.3 billion. Na Hyung-kyung has the details.
His face lined with tension. Argentine Economy Minister Axel Kicillof walks into a press conference in New York after failing to reach agreement on averting his country's second default in nearly 13 years.
This offer is legal for Argentina and doesn't violate our contract's clauses, but was not accepted by the vulture funds. This offer wasn't accepted because evidently they want more, and they want it now.
Global ratings agency Standard & Poor's has downgraded Argentina's foreign currency rating to selective default. Analysts say a default of Latin America's third largest economy is unlikely to have a huge impact on the global economy, but will likely weaken the Argentina peso as more people hold on to dollars. The imminent default stems from a years-long legal battle with two of Argentina's bondholders who had rejected restructured debt agreements in 2002 when the country first defaulted. The Buenos Aires government at present cannot pay other creditors because of a U.S. court ruling last month, which said no creditor can be paid unless the two so-called holdout creditors are paid as well. Kicillof says the country will take all the necessary measures to confront what he referred to as an unfair situation. 나현경, Arirang News.
And turning now to West Africa, where Sierra Leone and Liberia have declared a public health emergency in the wake of the worst Ebola outbreak on record. Liberian government announced on Thursday a series of drastic measures to halt the epidemic, including enacting a quarantine on a number of communities and shutting down schools across the country. And with the rapid spread of infections, medical aid groups there say they're fighting an uphill battle.
The situation is quite difficult. I would say we are on the top of the iceberg in a moment because the contact tracing is not really functioning, and this is one of the major issues what we have.
According to the World Health Organization, more than 670 lives have been claimed by the deadly fever since February. There is currently no cure or vaccine for the Ebola virus, which has a fatality rate of up to 90%. And over in India, a massive landslide triggered by torrential rains is feared to have trapped up to 160 people in the western state of Maharashtra. India's National Disaster Forces says at least 30 bodies have been recovered from the mudslide after part of a mountain gave way on Wednesday, devastating a small village. 10 people have been saved so far, while hundreds of rescue workers are still digging through the debris for any more survivors. But with several dozen homes still buried underneath, the death toll is expected to rise. Heavy rains and poor road conditions have hampered rescue efforts, along with poor communication infrastructure, according to authorities. Environmentalists are blaming deforestation and unchecked industrial development in the region as one of the main causes of the landslide. And that wraps up our look at international stories making headlines around the world. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Hello and welcome to sports. Well, let's start with the latest in South Korea's search for a new football manager. The Korea Football Association says they've narrowed it down to 3 candidates, all from overseas. The KFA's technical committee head Lee Yong-soo made the announcement after his team spent the last 2 days at the National Football Center choosing amongst 47 candidates, 17 South Koreans and 30 foreign nationals. However, their identities are still under wraps. He also said that the new manager would lead the team through the Asia qualifications for the 2018 World Cup. Meanwhile, the Pyeongchang Organizing Committee for the 2018 Winter Olympics officially has a new boss. Cho Yang-ho of Hanjin Group was elected to the post vacated early last week by Kim Jin-sun, who said new leadership was needed in the next phase. Cho was previously head of the Pyeongchang Olympic Bidding Committee in 2011. And moving on to the hard court, South Korea and New Zealand met in their second exhibition game in Soar, and this time the Kiwis won in buzzer-beater fashion. South Korea's Cho Sung-min was on fire again, helping the team with 5 three-pointers, but it was New Zealand's Kirk Penny who sank the last-second three-pointer for the winning basket. The win gives the Tall Blacks the 3-2 edge over Korea in 5 meetings this month. And now over to baseball. It's time for Thursday's KBO matchup between the Hanwha Eagles and Nexen Heroes in Seoul. Now second inning, Lee Yang-gi gets one in before Chung Bum-mo slams a 3-run shot. Hanwha gets the 4-0 cushion. But fourth inning, Nexen's Kang Jung-ho gets the RBI. Then Kim Min-sung homers for 2 runs. The next inning, Park Byung-ho singles to tie it all up. It's 4-4. But seventh inning, Chung Bum-mo hits the bases-loaded single to put Hanwha up, and then Hanwha's Felix Pie hits a 3-run home run in the 8th, and right now, Hanwha leads 9-5 in the bottom of the 8th inning. And looking at the other games, we have NC taking down Kia 9-1. Samsung defeats LG 8-4. And finally, Lotte beats Tusan 13-3. Well, that wraps it up for now. This has been Stephen Che. Please tune in next time for more sports updates.
Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Kim Bo-kyung with your weather update. Heat wave advisories have been extended to more regions, and earlier today the mercury in Gyeongsang City in Gyeongsangbuk-do province soared to 39.9 degrees. In this heat, it's recommended that young children and elderly refrain from doing outdoor activities. At the moment, we are seeing partly cloudy skies across the map, and Typhoon Nakri is at 130 kilometers southwest of Okinawa, Japan, and should indirectly affect us here in Korea. From tomorrow through Saturday, 100 to 200 millimeters of heavy downpours is forecast for Jeju. The showers will bring down the mercury a bit, but keep in mind that it won't be enough to appease the heat. On to Friday's readings. Seoul soars to 34, Daegu and Gwangju hit 31. As for other places, Jeju and Dokdo make it to 28, Mount Kumgang to 32. That'll do it for now, but I'll be back with more updates after midnight. See you then.
And that's Primetime News. I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for watching.
And I'm Kang Tae-ri. Have a great evening, and we'll see you soon.